Okay.
Just to set up the story here, we'd been in the WAN space for a very long time, since 2011, and since we've onboarded numerous devices and platforms, switching has become a real pain point for enterprises in terms of how they're managing configurations related to VLANs. And the problem and challenge with switches, it's such config heavy on the actual ports, right? You don't have as much of a structured config. You have a lot of port-based configuration. And really to handle that from an automation standpoint, you really have to have an engine that can discover the ports and understand if it's a trunk, if it's an access, if it's a VLAN for voice, or you really have to build an intelligence to look at port-based configuration. So in this final demo, we'll be using Gluware control again with config modeling, kind of showing the flexibility that config modeling can really take on almost any configuration pain point, right? And we're not trying to say throughout every script or every other way you're managing it. NAC is particularly difficult to implement and configure. So it's a pain point that our customers have brought to us. We've modeled it and now have successful deployments. And so we'll be demonstrating automating the push of NAC on access ports.
So the difficulty of L2.1x deployment is that you've got switches out there. You usually don't choose to deploy L2.1x, from the very beginning. You have an existing network, and all switch ports have a setting. It might be an access port, might be a trunk, might be an uplink, and this is already out there. So we're going to show how we deploy, L2.1x/NAC onto the switches, and we're not considering touching the switch port VLAN assignment, right? So it's already out there. So imagine the nightmare to try to do this manually. You got a stack of nine switches, 48 ports each, 384 different switch ports with their different, VLAN assignments, and let me just activate these this onto the assembly. I'm going to add this feature here that I've already pre-built. And I've got NAC here, my NAC policy. I'm adding it, and there's also another structure that is called a port map. That is a way to deal with the complexity of port maps. I'll show this to you in just a second. So the NAC statement right now, I kept it very short. I didn't even put the AAA stuff here just because I would like to focus on the switch ports. But this is the global configuration part of L2.1x. It works exactly the same way like any other features like SNMP and NTP. But this is what I want to show here is these are, let me make this a little bit bigger. These are the L2.1x statements under each switch port, and only the L2.1x switch port. There's no VLAN assignment, there's no spanning tree, there's no descriptions, there's nothing. These are only the lines that are important for my switch port. But here's the challenge. The challenge is this particular line here, for my dead action, is that I have the knowledge of the current VLAN assignments of the switch port. So trying to create a template like this manually, it's going to be very difficult because every switch port is different. So you would like to have an easy way to be able to reference this existing switch port, VLAN value that is already in the switch. And of course, you want to do this dynamically at provisioning time because this value can change at any time. So the way we do this, the same way that groups earlier, I explained earlier that it's a way to control the boundaries of interventions of the Gluware engine. The groups here are also doing this kind of discovery magic here, because I can specify here, only the names of commands allowed per switch port, right? And I can also specify some items that I would like the engine to automatically discover for me. So these are, regular expressions, regex strings here, and you can see that for the VLAN section here, this one is the one that I'm interested. So some of this is already pre-filled for you. You can completely control and go and chase up, any value that you might be interested under the switch port, but this one is already, pre-baked for you. Switch port VLAN access. And whatever value that is, I'm going to call it access, right? So VLAN access is what I'm interested in. So if I go back to my CLI here, I'm just calling it. The discovered device called VLAN access put it there, please. So if I go, there's one thing I want to show, is that I would like this to only be done where you do have a switch port VLAN value. Means that if there's no VLAN value, a trunk, an uplink, don't render. So this is where, again, the group comes into play, is that I can just make this conditional and say, you do all this when this exists. And you just specify that condition, right? And you can apply this template of switch port, on various ports. And right now, what I've done is that I said to the engine, this template of NAC, only do this from port 1 to 20, right? I can easily select and add more ports if I want to. 23, I don't want 23. This is, how I do it. If I make that happen now, I'm going to say to the engine, OK. And again, let's preview on this switch. But before I preview, I want to show you the state of this switch just very quickly. And how the switch ports are currently assigned. So you can see I have no configuration from port 8 onwards. I only have a switch port configuration for port 1, port 2, port 5, port 6, port 7, and 3 is a trunk, and 4 has no assignment, right? So let's launch the preview. Connect to preview. Going to the log. And so what the engine is going to do is that for every switch port, because you invoke the switch port and you have all these collections of regular expressions of things to chase up, then you haven't even started designing your CLI for the feature you're considering, that it's already at your disposal when you put the CLI in the Gluware model. So let's go and review this. And you can see 1, 2, 5, 6, 7 are only the ports that's going to be touched. This is what we've shown because they've got a VLAN ID. And look, 1, 2, 3, 987, 244, 444. These are the values that you could see here. So you can see that in a very simple manner, there's a way to reference an existing state of the configuration and grab value from the device. And I've done this without scripting.
Yep. And we're getting near wrapping up on time. So last few questions.
Can you spend a couple minutes talking about the business side of it? So how is this packaged? How is it licensed? Are you working with partners?
Yep. On the business side, first of all, how it's sold, it's the Gluware. Gluware controls the platform, and then you can license individual applications. So like, drift, config modeling, OS upgrade as an example. And then the cost structure is primarily based on number of nodes under management. And then if it's a software as a service or if it's an on-prem, you can do on-prem software as a service as well, but most large enterprise do perpetual license. So it's either or. And again, there's quite a few variabilities in terms of determining the price based on what they need. So there's a lot of flexibility there. In terms of the business, our target market is that medium-large enterprise. As we said, quite a few folks have virtually no automation today. Some are struggling with kind of legacy tools that have old approaches. Some have kind of these vendor tools that aren't kept up to what they need to be. And so, in fact, we had a great show at Cisco Live. A lot of people were, excited about the direction of DNA Center, but then they realized that a lot of where it's going, we can already do today. So that's kind of exciting for them to come and see that realization that this approach toward model-driven and having an intent-based engine that's intelligent can apply that. So we have direct sales and we have partners as well. For example, like WWT or other resellers that resell networking equipment can partner and deliver our software. And so really, we're flexible in terms of if an enterprise wants us to work through a partner, we generally can engage and work on that partnership. So where it's where I think it's heading here a bit is that, as you see, there's a lot of opportunity to take this platform and make it do a whole lot for you. Some customers want it done for them versus really kind of learn the constructs and really, some want to take it on, and some go, forget trying to learn Python, I'm just going to capitalize on this. Others want it done for them, and so we have a services delivery team, as well as we're ramping up partners to do that service delivery as well, because as you can see, there's just numerous areas where there can be customization to meet that requirement. The benefit of the Gluware platform is almost everything you've seen here can be highly customized. And we didn't even really get into more of the workflow component, because when you do go that path, it is really pretty highly customized because someone is telling us the workflow they want us to do. And so we found it's better not to pre-populate with workflows. We'd rather build the workflows based on real customer requirements. Yeah, so yeah. So we're right at the tail end, but so a couple of, perfect.
So for enterprises with a lot of devices, if you're making a configuration change, an example is I'm changing loopback address on all the routers. It doesn't happen normally, but if I have to, then how would you provide that unique variable value, which is the IP address for each router, if the change is going to be on numbers of devices?
Yeah, absolutely. When it comes to IP management, Gluware has an internal IPAM, and you can have it pull from a pool, or you can have it assigned, and then there's a table where you're assigning it based on the network node. So we can either handle the IP address management within Gluware, or we can make an API call to a third-party source of that IP. So really, again, it's static. You could put it in, pulled from a table, or...
But if I'm putting in as a static IP address, then how am I going to do it for 1,000 routers, for example? How am I going to provide that 1,000 values to Gluware engine that router 1 is IP address 1.1.1.1, for example? Yeah,
that gets into pulling a variable and then using a discovery element. So discovering something about the device and then pulling in the right IP for that device. And so we were showing, you can integrate discovery and then a dynamic allocation of a field, be it a VLAN ID or an IP address, based on discovery. So yeah, I mean, just like NTP, I could discover where the device is located and then pull in the right NTP server for that region. You have the ability to integrate discovery with the proper rendering of that value. Yeah.
And that all that data could be previewed as well. If you have all this knowledge of IP addressing plans somewhere, then it could be onboarded, and then the engine will make the decision in choosing the right one at the deployment time.
Yeah.